We're about to hear from a husband and wife team who are more than authors. Jim Sells is an accomplished professor. He is Rosemary S. Hughes Professor of Christian Thought and Mental Health and co-director of the Charis Institute of Regent University. And Heather Sells is a familiar face here at CBN as the managing editor of CBN News, who has brought us countless wonderful stories over the years. Jim and Heather, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Before we get into a really serious and deep, important topic, I have to ask, husband and wife writing a book together, you have another author as well, but what's that experience been like for you?
Well, typical in our marriage, Jim is very enthusiastic, has big ideas, and so he was the one who presented the concept for the book to me. But I will tell you that I struggled because I'm used to like quick turns or turning a story within a couple days, you know, maybe a couple weeks, but this was like a couple years. So for me, this was a challenge.
Yeah. I think it's great for every couple to do what they each do individually, finding ways to do this thing together collaboratively. So Heather contributed with a thing that she can just contribute, and that's interviewing people. That's what she does here. And she didn't have to become a psychologist. She could be a journalist. And so we could blend our unique traits. And I think every couple really has to do that. If it's gardening and auto mechanics, finding some way to do that collaboratively.
Well, here's another unique blending that's going on here. This is such an important topic, mental health in this country. And so you're showing churches how to work with mental health professionals, because isn't there often a cynicism between Christians relying on medicine or how they view the secular and how the secular views the faith component? You're trying to bring those together.
Correct. Yeah. The insufficiency and adequacy to address the problem cannot be met successfully unless churches and clinicians are collaborating. The problem is too big and the cost is too high.
Are they realizing this now?
Yes. There is an abundance of grassroots examples popping up in churches and communities all over the country. And I was most caught with it by simply driving through a country road in South Carolina, and I drove past a church and it just said family council here. This was in the middle of a rural area, and I thought of all the things they could put on their marquee, not Bible study Wednesday 7 o'clock or prayer meeting. It's like, if your son or daughter has an opioid addiction, come here. We can help. And that was the message implied in that family council here. And that theme is addressed in every community, in every church, in some way or another.
Well, Heather, what we're seeing here, it's in the light now that Christians, Christian families, believers have mental health. They have addictions, but also mental health struggles. What are you seeing in the Christian community even regarding mental health and challenges people are having?
Well, I think during the pandemic, a lot of the stigma, not all of it, but some of the stigma lessened. People became more aware that this really is an issue. Churches became more aware. And so we talk about this in the book. We're seeing even more pastors just talk about it openly from the public, like, I'm struggling.
Yeah, they hit it a long time.
And pastors used to be worried, I can't preach if I talk about this. Now pastors are talking about this.
That takes courage. It
yeah,
really
it takes courage, but also what it does is it lets people in the pews know this is okay to talk about. I'm not a bad Christian because I'm struggling with my mental health, and let me be transparent with my Christian community who ultimately can come alongside me and walk me through this.
Jim, the title, Beyond the Clinical Hour.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
90% of all mental health care is defined by that 50-minute hour where a person sits with a counselor, marriage and family therapist, social worker, or psychologist, and is being billed to insurance companies. With the need outpacing the capacity to attend care, we have to think of a different model. That's a very expensive, very time-consuming approach to care. The average psychologist can only attend to about 200 people in a given year, but there is 20 million people in line standing outside the door, and at 200 a year, it's going to take thousands and thousands of psychologists to address the problem.
People are falling through the cracks.
Right. We have to think about a type of care that includes both the clinical competence of that professional as well as the millions of people who are willing to attend to the needs of others in a helping role.
So how can churches partner with the medical industry or mental health capacity to get improvement for people? How do you see this merging together?
Yeah, I see pastors first identifying within their congregations the champion, that person within their church that they can rely on to help the pastor think through a program-specific, church-specific need.
So pastors may just feel ill-equipped themselves, right? I mean, someone in their congregation and they're like, well, how do I possibly help? I'm not trained for this, right? So you're saying identify someone who maybe have expertise in that?
Yeah. Centuries ago, the Puritan pastor Richard Baxter wrote a manual about care. And he went, in his church, he would visit every family every year. Well, a church in this culture a pastor cannot do that, like house calls. But there are people within the church, and there are collaborative relationships with professionals that are part of the Christian community by which care to full families, couples, individuals can be addressed.
Yeah. Heather, are you already seeing collaborations that have been successful?
Yes, I think we've gotten to the point where a lot of pastors are aware, look, I don't have the expertise. I need to refer out sometimes. So that is fantastic. But also, what we're seeing is, and you've probably seen this in your circle, I've seen it in mine, people can't get in to see their therapist, right? Yeah. There is a months-long wait. So, and even if they do get in to see a therapist, they need someone to walk alongside them before, during, and after. And so we're really advocating for the church to be eyes wide open, and how can the church come alongside therapists, and how can therapists work with churches? But right now, what we're talking about in the book is everything from peer groups, where people with different diagnoses or just frustration, sadness, discouragement get together and come together. And we're also seeing a lot of therapists connecting with pastors, working collaboratively. And that might just mean like a therapist coming alongside a youth pastor talking about cutting in the youth group or whatever it is. So there's a lot of organic movement right now that we're seeing that's really exciting.
Yeah. What about this national pilot program you're working on? That's really going to make a difference. That's a fancy title, but it's helping people.
It's a gracious funding source has given us startup money to create a nationwide clearinghouse of resources around how churches can address the problem. And the title of it is called the Church Cares Initiative, and it can be found at thechurchcares, all one word, .com. So that is what I'm doing now post-book. The book identifies the problem. We're trying to create collaboratively with using advanced technology and mental health resources that are being developed from organizations all around the country, pool them together and make them available, disperse them to churches of every denomination, of every culture, and of every geographic setting. So urban, rural, suburban. We are seeking to develop programs for your church.
For people that are struggling, for families that are struggling, something you hit on in this book is compassion is so significant, right? There's empathy and there's compassion, but why is compassion so key when someone's struggling in your life that you love?
Yeah, compassion has feet. It goes somewhere. Empathy is just the emotional connection that if I am working with you, Andrew, as a client, as a psychologist, I can have tremendous empathy for you and your circumstance, but I don't go home with you. And I'll see you next week, and you'll work your plan, your instruction, your worksheets. You'll attend to those things individually, but there's a community around you that has the capacity to be investing in you every day. There's a behavior, there's a lifestyle, there's a relational factor that a clinician just can't possibly meet for you.
So last question here, we're about to run out of time. For a pastor who's struggling, sees this challenge in his congregation, doesn't know where to start, what's your wisdom for him or her?
Identify that collaborator, that champion within your church. Talk about what other churches in your community are doing specifically around what specific issues. Some churches, every church can't do everything, but we can do this and you're doing that. Third, look for sources of support like what we're developing at the Church Cares so that you can address the needs specifically and develop a plan.
It's so important. This is a great resource. It is called Beyond the Clinical Hour. And we just need wisdom in the church, and this is a great resource for people to have that. Thank you both so much for joining us.
So glad to be here.
You're welcome.
And on behalf of Charlene, we say goodbye and God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow on 700 Club Interactive. Bye-bye.